chili cook-off today. For those of you just joining us, I'm sorry, I had to put that in there. But I will quickly introduce to you Byron Shetler, and he is going to talk about OEE today, so very exciting times. You guys click on the Q&A section, switch to host, ask me questions during the time, and we'll try to answer all of them or as many as we can after his presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and make him presenter and move right along here. Byron.
Thanks, Jen, and welcome to today's Tech Tips Live on OEE. OEE is also known as Overall Equipment Effectiveness. And as a special bonus, for all of you tuning in today, you will be the first to see the new, Alexa, drum roll please, GainSeeker Platform Library. The GainSeeker Platform Library, or GPL as we like to call it, is a collection of ideas, best practices, and tools for maximizing the value users get from deploying the GainSeeker suite. As you can see, we have a few kits that are live, and there are more on the way. For example, how to use GainSeeker to conduct and track audit data. In some cases, we're drawing on our own experiences in implementing these kits, and in other cases, we are working with customers to make their efforts available to a wider audience. Let's take a deep dive into the OEE link. The OEE kit is laid out in 4 sections. Besides the home page, there's information around planning an OEE implementation, a few scenarios on how to conduct data entry, and how to use OEE data in the charts module. I'll click on the OEE homepage link, and we'll look at the definition of OEE as background for the rest of the talk. I feel like I need to spend some extra time on the theory today in order to lay the foundation for when we get into the software. So OEE is made up of 3 components. Availability, or uptime, which is the inverse of downtime, and that can be defined as the ratio of operating time to planned production time, or scheduled time. Examples of downtime might include equipment failures, material shortages, and changeover time. Performance, or throughput, is the second component. Performance takes into account all the factors that cause your process to operate at less than maximum speed. Examples include machine wear, substandard materials, misfeeds, and operator inefficiency. One way to calculate performance is to multiply the ideal cycle time by the total pieces produced, and then divide by the total operating time. For example, a 60-second cycle time times 60 parts made in an hour, which is 3,600 seconds, gives us 60 times 60 over 3,600, which is 1 or 100%. So anything less than 60 parts in an hour would give us a performance value less than 100%. The third component of OEE is quality, or first pass yield. The inverse of this is scrap. The calculation for quality is pretty simple. It's just the good pieces divided by the total pieces. After you have calculated all 3 components of OEE, you multiply them together to get your OEE value. The home page also lists some of the benefits and pitfalls of using OEE. On the planning page, one customer that I've worked with chose to define OEE simply as performance. So you'll need to decide if you want to start with one piece of the puzzle or dive right in and collect data for all 3 OEE components. Other items to consider in the planning stage are the time frame. Should you collect and store data every 5 minutes, hourly, once per shift, or once a day? Collecting data at a more granular level, say once an hour, doesn't stop you from analyzing it at higher levels like daily, weekly, or monthly. Remember, though, that unless you have automated data collection, anything more than once an hour will probably end up burdensome for the operator. With automated input, if you're typically going to look at longer time periods during your analysis, say daily or weekly, then collecting data every 5 minutes is probably overkill and won't give you any real benefit. Sorry, I had clicked on the wrong page there. You also need to consider your data sources. Will you start off with direct operator input? In one project I worked on, we had the operators read a counter and record its value once an hour using the keyboard. This saved a lot of expense in hooking up to a very old PLC network. On the other hand, it is fairly simple for GainSeeker to connect to an OPC server or an MT Connect data stream to read the OEE data on a periodic basis. Another point to consider is the traceability that you will collect in conjunction with the OEE data. We often collect department, line, and machine so that we can compare similar lines or break it down to the machine level when charting the data. One added benefit of collecting the data in GainSeeker is that you may choose to record downtime reasons as downtime occurs. You might also want to collect defect reasons as you enter the piece counts. Entering reasons for quality and availability gives you the ability to drill down into those reasons when viewing Paretos in the charts module. Sometimes the reasons are available from the system the data is coming from, and other times operator input is required to record the reasons. The OEE data entry page is still under construction, so let's jump into the software. Finally. All right, here we go.
Byron's favorite part, right?
Let's start off with a simple inspection. And we'll go ahead and enter some traceability. The hour that we're collecting the data for, operator, baking department, and say we're on a bagger machine. Looks like we're making chocolate chip cookies. All right. Now what we can do at this point is collect some simple OE information without any reasons, just entering the numbers. And we can say we were down for 4 minutes, so we were running for 56 minutes, and we're not going to give any reason why we were down. And if we're running a cycle time of every 6 seconds for this hour, we made 590 good parts out of 600 total parts, assuming 100% performance. And I can go ahead and click the Submit button, and I've just stored some OEE information into the system. It can be that simple. Now, as an alternative, we could enter the reasons we were down for those 4 minutes. So I can say at this point that we had 4 minutes where we didn't have any product for the bagger. Again, entering how many good products we had and our total number of bags that went through the line. So behind the scenes, in this particular example, I have a script pushing the sample size of 60 minutes of scheduled time into the correct placeholder for the OEE calculations. The script also takes the number of non-conforming units and subtracts it from the sample size to get the number of available minutes, which is 56. If we switch over to the inspection editor module, I'll go ahead and submit that. You can see here that there's a formula at the bottom of this inspection screen. And if we look at the formula, you can see there's a pretty simple first formula: set the sample size of the value and subtract the number of non-conforming units from it for the available time, and then the sample size, the 60, is the scheduled time. So that's a pretty simple Python script that can take the information, put it into the right place for OEE calculations later, plus we have the added benefit of having the reasons why we had some downtime. All right, now let's switch over to the charts module. And here we see a OEE combined chart. So the blue bar is our OEE value, and if you remember, you multiply the availability, performance, and quality times each other to come up with an OEE value. And These values are for individual days of a week. At this point, you could right-click and duplicate this chart to break out any of the component charts. So I could look at, let's say, performance, and there with some color coding, I can see that I've been running under the acceptable limit. You see the A equals 90 off to the right. That's my acceptable. My goal is 95%, and I've only been running at about, well, not even up to 90% except for this last day. So you can get a quick view into any of the component features by themselves, along with the overall OEE. If we go up to the settings on the toolbar, I'll go ahead and type in OEE, and we can go see where you might set up the value. So our performance value, our goal was 95, and our acceptable was 90. So those are pretty easy to set up in your configuration to whatever goals you might set for your company. You might also have a dashboard set up to look at your enterprise OEE. And this will show your overall OEE again on a dial gauge with some bar gauges underneath for your availability, performance, and quality. And just like any other GainSeeker dashboard, you can right-click to see the data behind any of these gauges. If you have a uptime goal, you might set up, again, color-coded, where here are 3 different packing lines. If you have a certain goal, looks like here probably 97% in this case that we want to be up, and then it turns red if it's below that 97%. Let's jump into a few desktops, and we'll look at OEE by week in this case. And there you can see for 5 weeks with the goals and the coloring as to whether you're making the goal or not. And this is again for availability in this particular case. Now, if I want to do a second level grouping, I can go into my settings dialog again and say I want to do a second level grouping because I'm curious how I'm doing with the shifts for each particular week. So I'll go ahead and click there, and you can see shift 1 is blue, the red is shift 2, and green shift 3. You can see how each shift plays out each week, and there's not much difference between the shifts. But that you could break that down by operator, shift, line, various other categories. Again, as you collect a lot of traceability within the GainSeeker system, that you have that available later on to drill down and really tear into the data and see what's happening.
Hey Byron, isn't that second level grouping something that just came out in one of our latest versions?
I think that's in a recent release, yeah. I think 8.8. All right. Now, if you remember, we collected some defect data during one of the data input scenarios, and you can collect reasons for downtime and for quality issues. So let's go look at availability or downtime. And we'll load up a desktop. And here we have 3 packing lines. And if we drill down on pack line 1, we can see that, and we'll look at defect, we'll see that no product is the biggest issue for the line being down. That seems to be the main cause. So again, you've got all the drill down capability within GainSeeker for your OEE data. I've also got another desktop set up for the quality for the packing lines. And here again, if we drill down on pack line 1 and look at the defects, our number 1 defect in that particular case was code date wasn't readable on a package. And if we look at maybe which product is causing that, oh, the snickerdoodles and chocolate chips are about in a dead heat. I like chocolate chips, so we'll click on that one, and you can see you've got a couple operators accounting for about 75% of the defects. Now, we don't know if they're the ones that are actually creating the defects or reporting the most defects, but you get the idea. You can drill down into the data as far as the traceability will let you go.
I see Byron's kind of looking at the time. Just a reminder, you guys, for questions, please don't hesitate to click on the upper right-hand corner where it says Q&A and switch it to type your question to the host. And in the meantime, I'll let Byron to keep going.
Okay. Just a few more things to consider. You might want to look at storing your ideal cycle time in a standard variable, or read it from a table somewhere, or pull it out of another system. You could also hard code the value if it doesn't vary by product or machine, just to make data input simpler so the operators don't have to deal with it. And in order to keep things simple, you might want to ignore planned lunch breaks or other breaks, especially if the machine keeps running during that time. You can always go back and subtract out those breaks later as you fine-tune the data, but to keep things simple, you might just want to ignore those at startup. And whether you are collecting data manually or automatically, you may want to set a downtime threshold. In other words, the machine must be down for 2 minutes before you consider it down and force the operator to enter a downtime reason. Finally, collecting piece counts might also be useful if your process is one in which a tool may need to be replaced or adjusted after a certain number of parts are produced. I know that we have worked with a couple of customers in setting up operator notifications based on that part count in the past. So there'd be some side benefits from collecting that data as well, besides the OEE.
Right. Well, thank you, Byron. I know I have a quick question before I go to our first question on here. Is in all the times you've seen our customers do OEE and implement it, has two of them ever been the same?
No, I don't think I've ever experienced two the same, and typically even the definition of OEE will vary from customer to customer. Some consider it, just the performance issue. Some might look at all three components. So there's a lot of variation out there. There's some standard terms and definitions for OEE, but everybody seems to implement it their own way.
And GainSeeker seems to be able to do it however
right.
we need to do that to best accommodate the customer.
Exactly. What makes sense for them. Yep.
Right. Awesome. So one of the first questions I have in here is, especially when you were showing us the new GainSeeker platform library, and then you kind of showed us a little bit of the inspections in that one sample that you're showing us. So are the inspection scripts part of the new platform library?
Well, they're not in there yet, but they are coming. As we continue to flesh out these web pages and put some more content into those, we'll be including scripts, templates, maybe dashboards to download, that sort of thing. So that's on the drawing board. We just haven't fleshed those out yet.
Right.
But they are definitely on the way.
Exciting. I think I might have been recruited for some of that too. So, I do have another one. This is a good one. How do you collect data from a database automatically without having to continuously run a script to pull in that data to make it be, and he's got quote, quote, real time? Read it again. It was a long one.
Sure. Well, I think what we're getting at there is you might have a scheduled task that runs once an hour to go out, query a database, read the values in, store everything, and then just go away. So it's not continuously running all the time.
Right.
I mean, you could run a script with a timer that would go once an hour, but in that scenario, I prefer to do a scheduled task and just have it trigger once an hour, do its work, then go away, free up resources, and that seems to work pretty well.
Okay, awesome. Great question, by the way. I do have another one. Why use GainSeeker for OEE instead of a point solution like Born?
Okay. Sure, I've run into these devices from Vorn. They're pretty slick. They do a good job of collecting real-time OE information at a certain machine or on a line, however it's set up. There's some issues with that. If you want to go back to yesterday, for example, you're not going to have any idea what happened. Even a couple hours, you're probably not really going to know what's going on because they are more real-time and they're showing you the current picture, but they don't have much in terms of history. Other things that you would have difficulty doing with the Vorn is rolling up multiple lines or multiple machines or even machines within a line. You're just not going to get the ability to say, how are my lines doing, how are all my machines doing, roll those up and look at it on a plant-by-plant basis as well. I mean, you can, with GainSeeker, you could say, how's my overall OEE for my plant, for all the machines and all the lines all rolled up together. And these point solutions really don't give you that kind of flexibility. They're more focused real-time right on that machine right then.
Awesome. Awesome. We still have some time if anybody else has a question. I actually have a question. Hopefully it's not it's not a stupid question, but you guys can laugh at it. Now that we have the ability to dashboard external data without even saving it, could that be something that we do real time, being able to collect from those machines and display how we're doing?
Sure. Yeah, we would be able to collect, you know, I think the Vorn might even have an Excel output. You know, so we could read that data in from the Excel, not actually store it, just read it in to the system and show it in a dashboard, that sort of thing,
right, so we can,
to give visibility to that.
And as far as implementing OEE, do you see more of a manual data entry or more automated or somewhere in between?
In the projects I've been involved with, they typically start off either manual or a mix of automated and manual. One that I'm thinking of, we set up automatic collection in terms of numbers, but there was nothing in the system we were collecting from giving us reasons for downtime, as an example. So if we saw a signal and we saw this, I think the threshold in their case was a couple minutes, you know, once they were down for more than 2 minutes, then a screen popped up for the operators to enter the reason why they were down, and it was expected that, you know, once they got the machine back up and running and figured out what the reason was, they would input that in, and then we would tag that reason along with the data, which was being collected real time in the background. But you know, it's pretty simple to get going with the manual input, and often that gives you a good picture into what the issues are, what you're dealing with, and then you know if you want to take it another step further or not.
Right. Awesome.
I guess that's one thought I'd want to leave everybody with, is to start small. Recently I found out that a customer spent a little over $100,000 with a large automation company just to have their OEE, just to plan out their OEE implementation. And you know, with the existing GainSeeker installation, they could have quickly had a couple of lines collecting data manually for a fraction of the cost. They could have seen what it had told them and then decided how to move forward. So that, you know, that's another alternative to spending a huge amount of money to do a lot of that planning up front.
Awesome. That's good advice, right? And starting small, you can always continue and grow bigger as time goes on, right? Thinking of that GainSeeker platform library, we kind of want to leave with a little bit of information on that.
Okay. So should I say the URL is hertzler.com/GainSeeker-platform-library.
And that's super top secret right now. You guys are like getting the first dibs.
Double top
right?
secret.
It's not published as a link on our website yet, correct?
Right. I think you have to know the URL to get there. can't link to it from anywhere on the website yet. So it's still under development, but it's getting fleshed out pretty good. So pretty happy with the direction it's going.
As we still have about 5 minutes, another question. Is there an assessment service that you can help define what is needed for OEE?
One of our technical project managers recently went out on a service call and did just that. So yeah, we have a service and a form people can fill out to kind of identify what their goals are for the OEE and start to identify what traceability they want to track, where the data, what the data sources are, that sort of thing. So yes, we would have an assessment service where we can come out and help define what that project might look like.
Awesome. And piggybacking on that, one of the questions when you guys exit this WebEx, one of the first things is we're going to ask you, where are you guys in your thought process of OEE? And one of them is if you want to go ahead and have one of us reach out and talk with you, we can absolutely do that, no pressure. But trying to judge, OEE is coming around more and more lately. I know we've been hearing it and going out, like you said, Craig just came back from doing one of those assessments, so that's always good to know. Anybody else have any last-minute questions, comments? We did have a good comment. Thank you. I like the application ties into a lot of other facility line machine information, so that's positive. And again, I think you need to use the Pareto chart, Pareto to analyze. So seems like we're getting some good feedback here. And we've got a few more minutes, but I guess we can always end early. Nothing wrong with that. And again, at the end, when you guys leave, they'll just ask you a couple questions. One is kind of like, where are you at in your OEE planning? And the other one is we always want to have feedback for our future Tech Tips Live. So we're still planning on once a quarter. This was actually a suggestion from one of them from last time, so we definitely listened to you guys. I want to thank you all again for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. Hopefully it's been very beneficial. One more suggestion, can you show the URL again? If you look at Byron's screen at the very top, I'll go ahead and say it because if you're like me, it's very tiny and you're squinting. But it's www.hertzler.com/GainSeeker-platform-library. And I will also, we do have this being recorded, so I will go ahead and send a link out. Usually it takes about 24 hours, and if I remember, and I'm a really good host, I'll send the link as well to that GainSeeker platform library, and again, would welcome your comments on it as we're just starting this out. So I guess that's where I end, and again, like I said, thank you very much. Always appreciate your feedback. So thank you, get back to work, and have a great day. Woo.